Welcome back to Northwest Digital News. I'm Kevin Hunter with Kyle Torgeson. We have a special guest in studio, Joel McEntire. Joel is announcing a run for the 19th District, Seat 2 here in Washington.
Yes, I am.
Well, thanks for joining us, Joel, and share a little bit with our viewing audience where you come from and kind of your interest in running for public office.
Well, I'm actually from right here. I grew up in Cathlamet, Washington, and that's where I live today. It just happens to be that way. I'm a school teacher in Cathlamet. I teach 6th grade language arts and science, and I've always had an interest in staying busy and being productive, being a productive person, but I didn't really see myself running for the state legislature even not too long ago, but some time ago, just occurred to me that it'd be a good thing to do, and that I think I have some good ideas and experience that'd be great for our district.
Now you're running as a Republican for the seat,
Yes.
currently occupied by Brian Blake, and you have a fair amount of background and history with the GOP party. Talk about that a little bit.
I do, yeah. So when I was about 19 years old, I still didn't know anything about politics, government, anything like that. My brother was actually a debater at LCC. He was a really good debater. I think he debated in nationals and things like that. And I had to sit down with him one time, and I asked him, like, what's the difference between Democrats and Republicans? And he told me some things about their platforms and their differences. And I said, well, I suppose I'd probably more on the Republican side. And I started watching the news. I started trying to get myself educated on the differences between the political parties. And I found out that I really resonated with some of those Republican values and platforms, not all, but most of them. And I pretty much just watched the news and voted in November, and that was it. I wasn't involved at all, not for several years. And after a while, I started to see that there were people on the ballot that kind of surprised me, that they were Republican, that they were on the ballot. And I thought, why does this happen? Why do we don't get the best people on the ballot? What's going on with that? And what occurred to me was that it was my fault that was happening, because I was only active on election day. I would watch the news and try and stay a little bit educated, listen to the radio, but I didn't do anything else. I would only vote on that day. So when I went to college at Central Washington University in Ellensburg, I saw a sign that said, College Republican Party, come get some pizza, soda, and let's organize. And
Get involved.
It was a bunch of students, and that was my first involvement at all. And I stayed with that College Republican Party, and all we would do is we would have a debate topic of the night. We would meet twice a month, and we would have soda, pizza, and we would debate something and bounce ideas off each other. And I think that's what the real purpose of college was to share ideas, and we respected each other. We were very respectful, and we had some heated disagreements, but it was a really good time. I ran for vice president of that club, and I was elected. And that was the first election I've ever had. Shortly after that, I started getting involved with grown-up party politics. I started attending the Kittitas County meetings, the GOP meetings. And I didn't say anything. I just sat there and listened. I didn't know what they were talking about. They're like, do we have a motion and a second? And all in favor, yeas and nays. I didn't know what they were talking about. It was a different language to me. And I sat there and I listened and I learned. And after a while, I got to know some of those good people and talk with them. And I decided to run for vice chair of that party. And so I was elected there. Currently, I don't live in Ellensburg anymore, but currently I'm the chair of the Wahkiakum County Republican Party. So my progression in the party has been genuine grassroots from the beginning, just slow but sure, milk before meat. And now I'm where I'm at today because of a lot of good mentors and a lot of good people along the way helping me out.
You mentioned about debating and having civilized debate, respectful debate, and one of the things that we see a lot in national politics, the vitriol that people get involved in and really hating each other for their political differences, to me, is just really a lot of nonsense. Because, regardless of which party somebody comes from, in my opinion, you can still sit down, regardless of what your belief set is, and you can still sit down, and that's what voters really expect you to do. You're running as a Republican for a seat right now, occupied by a Democrat. And, if you should win this position and go to Olympia, what voters are looking for is that you actually have respectful debate with other people in the House and actually get something done.
Right. The worst thing I think you can do is believe that your opponent or your ideological opponent wants the worst for the people of Washington or the people of America. Like, my opponent hates women. My opponent hates minorities. My opponent hates old people. I don't think that's true with anybody. I don't think most politicians and most people involved in politics hate anybody. There's no evidence for that. We just disagree on what is the best way to help people. It would be like a husband and wife who have a son that has a son that's 30 years old, sleeps on the couch. Both of them love him, but one says we need to keep him on the couch so he doesn't get into the wrong crowd. Another one says we need to kick him out so he can learn how to take care of himself. Both want their kid to succeed, but they have different policy ideas on how it's supposed to be done. They see a different
route to the goal.
But there's no question that both parents love their kid, and I kind of see it like that. We're always saying, well, you hate somebody, but I think it's more often that, we just disagree on what's the best policy. Yeah.
Well, that's a perfect illustration of it. Well, I want to give people a little bigger and better snapshot of exactly who Joel McEntire is. And one of the things that I want to share, because we have a very active contingency of veterans throughout the 19th District, and a lot of people currently serving in the service, just as you are. And I'm a veteran myself. Served as an officer in the Army and trained troops, getting them ready for basic training and going on to eventually becoming deployed in the military. And so have a great deal of respect for anybody else who has the courage to put on the uniform, because as I would say to my recruits who would come to my camp, I'd say that, many Americans very proudly say the Pledge of Allegiance, but it's only a few Americans who put that pledge into action, and that's people who have the courage to step up and actually serve the country. So I commend you and salute your service. You're in the United States Marine Corps and in a reserve unit. Talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So I, again, never saw myself joining any service. In fact, as a young person, I didn't have any visions of what my future should be or shouldn't be. I just kind of went day by day. I remember my grandpa, who was a 20-year veteran of the Navy, telling me that if he could change one thing in the country, he would have it so that everyone has to do 2 years of military service or some kind of public humanitarian service. And I thought that sounded crazy talk to me, that how could you force someone to do military service? But now I understand why he said that. The benefits that military service can bring into your life, you can't buy with money. You can't purchase it. There's no other way to get it. You can't have friends that do it, or it can't be given to you by a family member or put in a will. It's something you have to earn for yourself. And so at a certain point when I was about 19 or 21, 22, the thought came to me that I should serve. And I didn't know for how long or where or when. I just thought I should. And so I started talking to recruiters. And the only thing that the Marines could tell me is that they were the hardest branch. They had the least benefits, the worst living conditions, the worst food, the worst treatment. And that appealed to me because I didn't want to be taken care of. I didn't want to be coddled. And most of all, I have this vision of myself as a 90-year-old man in a rocking chair. And I think, what are the things I'm going to regret that I can't do now because of physical limitations? And I had this fear that had I joined any other branch, that I would have maybe regretted not trying the harder one, even at the cost of those benefits. That I would have said, I wonder if I could have done it, and I wouldn't know. And so I said, I have to try. And I didn't think I was going to be able to do it. I went to boot camp, and I suffered the worst 3 months of my life of just sheer hell. And it was the best thing for me. It focused me, it straightened me up, it taught me discipline, the things I never had. And so those benefits that came to me, like I said, you can't buy with money. I would do it again because they're so valuable. So it's been great. I have gotten more from the military than I think the military has gotten from me. I think it's been an unfair trade. I've benefited greatly, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to serve. People thank me for my service, and I just say I love what I do. I love what I do. It serves itself.
We have a few pictures here on the screen. Share with our viewing audience what we're seeing. This picture here that's actually above me.
Sure.
That was during one of your deployments, was it?
It's not. That was a training exercise. So
Okay.
you can see there's some writing in the back. That's not any kind of classified material for anyone who's wondering. That's just those are made up numbers, made up names. It's just a training exercise. And that I'm in the back of a 7-ton truck. I'm there with the radio, ready to write things on that board if numbers change. If for some reason we lost an individual or gained an individual in our camp, I would write that down. That we've got one more guy on the camp, and so when the commander comes in and says, "How many people do I have on this post?" I can tell the commander everything. So that was what I was doing there. And there's a tarp over the back of the truck, and that's why I'm wearing what I'm wearing, because it's cold. So yeah.
How about this center one?
The center one is me at the boot camp graduation. If you can't tell, I have a light complexion in normally, and there I have a nice bronzy reddish color. And after 3 months of being out in the sun at boot camp, you get that. So my hair is nice and short, and my my physique is right where it should be. So yeah, that was right at boot camp. I think that was family day, I believe. So the families are permitted to come on base for one day and meet with their recruits. The next day is graduation, and then those they're not recruits anymore. They're new Marines, and they go home for 10-day leave, and then they go on to train more. So that was a couple days before I was released from leave. At that time, I was married. Married, and we have a daughter at that time, and so I was anxious to get home to them.
Okay, and how about this last picture?
So that's a good friend of mine right there. His name's Jake, and we joined the Marine Corps about the same time, and we didn't know it. That we didn't know each other prior to joining. We didn't know each other in boot camp, but we joined about the same time. We showed up at our unit, and just got a nice friendship going on, and realized, oh, we're in about the same time. And we always joke around and say, hey, are you going to get out? No, are you going to get out? And we always, no, I'm going to re-enlist. No, I'm going to re-enlist. And so we just have a good relationship. So I really like that guy. That's something about the military, is you can make friends who have a bond that you can't make anywhere else.
You know, what's interesting about that is you're likely well aware of the movie series titled Band of Brothers.
Yeah.
Well, I grew up with 6 brothers in my family, and then later my parents had a little daughter, and so there was 8 of us. But I grew up with 6 brothers, and when you talk about Band of Brothers, and I'm including, of course, both male and female, you know, in the service. But it very much was. I think of all the friendships that I made in the service as well. It was very much like a family, and these are people that you would do your job for, serve with, give your life for if you had to, just like they were family.
Yeah.
It was something, when you mentioned about all the you feel like you got the better end of the deal out of the military than you're giving, you know, the country. I think a lot of people who have served and are serving with the right attitude feel that way as well.
Yeah.
So very nice. So you're also a school teacher, and you teach here at John C. Thomas.
Yeah. Yep. That's my school right there.
Yeah. So before you get into the subjects that you actually teach, you mentioned that you also run the chess club.
I do.
So talk about that.
So I think my life is like a weird Picasso painting or something. I have a lot of weird things that I do that don't seem to match. And I learned chess when I was about 7 or 8 years old, but I didn't have anyone to play with. I played maybe a couple times a year with a friend when it was Fortune Smiles, but I didn't play very often. But I knew the rules, and I've always had this idea that maybe I was a smart guy. That I was a smart guy, and that smart people play chess. When I was about 26 years old, so this was about 4 years ago, I heard that the world champion of chess was from Norway. And I thought, I could probably beat that guy if I had a chance. And so I thought, how would I go about testing that? If I'm never going to see him, so how would I know if I could play? So I got online, and I found a chess website where you can play chess against people all around the world. And it will grade you and rate you about how good you are. I made an account, I played chess, and it pretty much put me at bottom of the barrel. Like if they're out of the players on that site, out of 100 players, there would be 97 players in front of me and 3 lower than me.
Mm-hmm.
I was that bad. And
right.
that's only the ones who are on the site who play, not
right.
to mention all the other Americans that don't play or don't have an account. And so I realized I'm not that good. And so I hate losing. Mm-hmm. I despise losing. Losing is the worst thing for me. I'm hyper competitive in a lot of ways. And so I just started playing all night long on this chess app, and I started to get better and better. And after a few years, I started to say, well, I'm going to watch some YouTube videos on chess strategy, try and learn some tricks. When I started teaching, I was good enough that I thought, I've learned a lot of stuff about chess, and I'm a lot better now. I'm not a professional. I still can't beat the world champion, but I'm a lot better now. And I want to share that with some of the kids because I never had that. A lot of the kids today don't spend a lot of time outside, and they're not going to. A lot of them don't have the athletic ability and want something else. And what else is there for kids at a school? If you have robotics clubs and things like that, it's in computer clubs and key clubs, that's nice. But I thought a chess club would be good. And so I started a chess club, and that's a picture of us at State the very first year. We couldn't go to State this year because it was over in the Tri-Cities area and it was too far to go. But I found that you just don't know how much talent there is out there for a game like chess about strategy and thinking ahead and thinking 10 moves ahead. Like, you bump into people in the world and you don't know that they could be super geniuses. And maybe they don't know it because no one's ever tested them. You know, there's these kids here who are born natural geniuses. You look at some of those trophies, like they earned those. They went up against kids. These kids had never played chess before, and they were winning games against kids who had been playing since they were little kids and had played hundreds of games. And so I decided to do it again this year. This is my second year teaching, and so I'm proud of the program we've got going there.
Excellent. Well, I've just been sitting here thinking and listening to some of the experiences you share, and you think about, you know, somebody running for public office, and what are things about somebody's background that actually qualifies them for the job? Because I have been a personal believer for a long, long time that, you know, the longer somebody serves in politics, the greater the likelihood is that they probably should get out.
Yep.
And fresh ideas and fresh people should get in. And so then what are some of the qualifications that make somebody a great person, a great legislator? And you talked about debating. You're going to have to be able to have respectful debate with people and work out a meaningful resolution. You mentioned about playing chess. Everything about the job is a chess game. From beginning to end. Yeah. And, you know, I think about your background in the service. I actually had a conversation because I was involved in a deployment regarding a homicide, and there was 13 different law enforcement agencies involved. And one of the law enforcement agents came up and was visiting with me about the tenacity that some of these soldiers were showing in this deployment that we were on. And I explained to him, I said, you got to remember something, that these are men and women who are trained that when they're given a mission, their job is to complete it. Where you might be working with people who are given a job and just say, well, you know, it's time to punch out. This is not these folks I'm working with. They're given a mission and they're going to see it done to the very end. And you're drawing from that same background.
Yeah, that's when you said that, punch out at a certain time, it's like, oh, it puts a shudder down my spine. And leave the job undone? Heaven forbid.
Yes. You know? So they were just amazed that, you know, some of the crazy things these soldiers were willing to do. I remember the snow that was blowing, these berms of snow that were sometimes 4 or 5 feet deep, and you know, the press and other people that were involved would say, well, this area is impassable, and here's the sergeant going, no, it's not, and we're going through it, and they're like, whoa, there's nothing that stopped these guys. No, you gave them a mission to find this girl, and that's what they're going to do.
Yeah, and sacrifice, I think it's just the military tells you right off the bat, and they're not sorry about it. You're one guy. You're one guy. It's the team. It's the mission that's important. And when you're called upon to sacrifice for the betterment of your brothers and sisters around you or the mission, it has to be done. And so everyone has that mindset. And I think politicians have it backwards sometimes, that others get sacrificed for them. It's for their benefit. They're looking for higher office. They're looking for the next raise, when sometimes they need to understand they're public servants. It's, it's the public that's important. They're the end, not you. So
what are the subjects you mentioned briefly about your role as school teacher, but you mentioned here off air before the show that your educational background is science and mathematics. What do you teach at the school?
So I teach language arts. I also teach a science class for 6th graders. And I started an elective program. At our school, we're lucky that we allow a period a day for an elective. And teachers make these electives. And so there's a robotics elective, and there's an architecture elective, and there's a weightlifting elective. And so I started a logic elective. And so I teach a logic class, which I think is something we are missing in our society.
Agreed. We talk about it all the time here on Northwest Digital News. A lot of missing logic in things.
We're missing just basic principles of how to problem solve. Just basic things like the process of elimination. Like people don't understand the process of elimination, and I don't think it's their fault. I think it's just that it wasn't expected in school. So people know their times tables. They know the capitals of the 50 states, or at least I had to learn them. Gettysburg Address and stuff like that. But what about logic? What about making a hypothesis and trying to prove it wrong and things like that, and learning about the philosophers and those who made logic, the Greeks and stuff. So I teach that stuff in class, and I try and supplement it with games and activities that use logic. So it's something I'm proud of.
You bring logic to the table. You bring a commitment to service and willing to see the mission through to the end. You bring debating skills to the game. You bring the smarts of chess and being able to think, steps down the road. Joel, there's a lot of people who have considered running for public office and succeeded in winning those positions. But just as a person who knows a lot of politically elected people across the country, multiple states, I've visited with many of them. I still have a lot of good friends actually who are in Washington, D.C. And sometimes that's beneficial for us here, from a news standpoint, because I learn about things sometimes long before they actually come out. And that we actually talked about in Northwest Digital News, if you maybe remember, Kyle, we were talking about this back in January about Paul Ryan stepping out of politics. And that announcement here was now just made official here just a couple weeks ago. But those are some examples. And so I think about all these different people that I've known over time, and I can't think of a better example of somebody who ought to consider running for office. You bring a lot of the tools to the table that are going to make you very effective as a state representative. And
I don't think I'm done, because it's every couple of years I get a new thing I focus on that I see a weak point in my being. I say I'm just not well-rounded enough. You know what I can't do? I can't cook. So eventually I'm going to get out a cookbook and watch some YouTube videos on cooking, and I'm going to take a master chef class, and I'm going to become a great cook. That's just an example, but I'll find some weak point in my life, and I'm going to focus on it. And I've heard a radio personality say he has attention surplus disorder. He has too much attention. He has too much attention and that's how I am sometimes. Sometimes I'll focus on something that is until it's done. And so I think that every couple of years I do this, and I'll probably have more random things to put in my my trunk, I guess.
When you're talking about problem solving and logic, and how people have really those have become weaknesses in society, and one of the things that we see a lot of now across the country with school kids and other people getting involved in a so-called political message is that it's largely constructed around emotion. And I see that, and even the arguments that happen here locally with local political issues, and you see how much of it is charged with emotion. It's like, we could get back to doing things on a reasonable level if we actually had people who understood applying logic and how to do problem solving and doing it in a respectful fashion. I've shared about an experience that I had as a young man early on in my career, and it was hugely impactful to me moving forward, because people always use this phrase, we need to get on the same page. And that can be both a good thing and it can be a very bad thing. And I learned how it could be a bad thing. in this capacity. I was working with Guardian Industries. It's a multi-billion-dollar company. I was at one of the 36 plants and a member of a 13-person management team. And Guardian Corporate hired a consultant to come in and talk to all of us. And the first session we have with all of our management team sitting around the room, I was the youngest guy on this whole group of managers. And so he starts with me and he says, Kevin, share what you think the mission and the goal of the company is. And like a good little soldier, you know, I said all my talking points. I was pretty sure my boss wanted me to say. And then it went to the next person and went all the way around the table. And finally it comes to the plant manager, who's the highest level of leadership there in this facility. And his name is Dave. And David just says, listen, we're all on the same page. You know, everybody understands what we need to do and et cetera. And after he got done talking, this consultant said something that was the totally unexpected piece of feedback. But he said, you know, as long as you all think alike, act alike, and talk alike, there's 12 of you at the table not needed. Because what makes you strong is your diversity and bringing in your unique backgrounds and being able to make all of that work and embrace those differences and come up with a outcome that's respectful and everything to everybody here at the table. And I was just like, one of my first reactions was, wow, am I the first one getting fired? Because I'm like the little guy on the totem pole. But I walked out of that later recognizing that one of the mistakes our leadership was making in that facility was he never allowed any of the other 12 people at the table to think. It was always, this is what I want done. And that was it. There wasn't any discussion around any of that. Yeah. And interestingly enough, after that whole consulting thing got done, the plant manager ends up being the one fired.
Oh, wow.
Because he was suppressing all that individuality and all the good feedback. I mean, there's a lot of smart people at the table and nobody thinking because we're following one thing.
And, you know, and it's hard because when you know the logical thing is unpopular, or the logical thing is going to have an emotional kickback, it's hard to say it. It takes a lot of courage to say you believe in something, which I know I have beliefs that are unpopular, and I'm probably going to just wait till people ask me about it instead of voluntarily come out with it. But there are things that I believe that I know are not in on the 51% or higher bar. That's just being any human being. No one believes exactly the same thing, and so you have to embrace those differences, like you said, and explain it well. And like I said, it takes courage to at least acknowledge that you're not going to be on the winning side of every popularity contest. It's something that bothers me when you look at politicians that have been around for 50 years, 40 years. And you've seen them flip and then flop and then flip and flop and flip again, because what happened is they licked their finger and put it up in the air and said, what are people for today? Oh, 51% of people want this. I am for that now. And then it goes back down to 49. They go, actually, on second thought, it goes back up to 51. They go, I meant to say yes. Yes, I am. I am for that. And it's so disgusting to see how fake it is. So I wish I had a mind reading goggles or a helmet or something. What do you really believe? Because I have no idea. I have no clue. And if maybe for one day it was honesty day where no one could lie, we could all, you know, if we all agree, we're all going to tell the truth. And now what do you actually believe today? And maybe we could figure something out. I don't know. But it's something that's disappointing to see in our elected officials.
Kyle, what do you think?
Well, I'd like to point out that some of the things that you've been saying, we've actually talked on the show, like successful businesses, what they do every 3, 6 months, 9 months, they actually look about what's going on, how can we improve, what's wrong, and pretty much that's what you pointed out. And that's actually pretty cool. A lot of successful businesses have actually been doing that, and that's pretty cool to see. And also with the, let me just pull back up the, let's see, the chess club. You said you went to state, correct?
Yeah, we did. That was in Tacoma.
Now, I'm from a band standpoint, so I don't, get the military standpoint. I don't get a lot of things, but I do have a very good band standpoint for music. And a lot of these bands, a lot of successful bands, a lot of great bands that are just amazing players, amazing things, have really great leaders. So seeing all these kids going to state, it's probably, have a great leader for that. So I just want to probably point that out there.
Yeah. I have a piano in my classroom too, so I'll let students come in and just make noise, because I think that's who else lets kids do that? Just come in and just try. So they'll try and make some noise, and sometimes I'll say, yeah, you need to move your finger one to the right so you can hit that A minor chord, get the progression just right. And they're like, what's a progression? And kids actually want to learn. That's the thing people don't understand, is what kids don't want to be in is prison. Mm-hmm. And that's what school, if you took everything else away, you have lunch at a certain time, you go to these different rooms at different times. It's set up in a prison-esque system. At least that's how I remember it when I was a kid. And just sometimes just saying, you know what, here's some things. You do you, and the kids will learn on their own without your help. They don't even need you. They would figure it out on their own. If there was a piano, they would learn how to play by themselves. If there was a math book and some problems, they would learn how to solve it on their own if you just get out of their way. And so it's a lesson I've learned teaching for a couple of years now.
Well, that's because kids have a curiosity about learning. And part of the reason that you've had exposure to a lot of different things yourself in your lifetime is because you have a curiosity about learning.
Yeah.
I've had sometimes people ask me, how I'm able to speak intelligently on a variety of different subjects and things like that. And I've just shared with them, I have a curiosity about learning, and I'm a very creative person. And on top of that, I do happen to believe that I can do just about anything if I just put my mind to it. If I want to do it, I'm going to crack it and I'm going to figure it out.
Yeah. And you're probably not afraid to say you don't know either.
That's correct.
Yeah.
You know what? That's classic, because I was on the advisory board for Minnesota School of Business and Globe University. And towards the last 6 months prior to graduation, when these students were going out into the business world, I was one of the people who got involved to help them, think about their interviewing skills and everything. And quite often these students would ask me, if I'm asked a question and I'm not sure, like, what do I say? And I was like, there are 3 words, like, I don't know, but I can always find out. Or I don't know, but I'm a great researcher. Or I don't know, but I'm a great learner and I can pick it up.
Yeah.
But use the word I don't know, and don't be ashamed to do it when you don't know. And yeah.
It reminds me of the story of Socrates. If you're familiar, the ancient Greek philosopher, I think it was 4th century, 5th century BC. The oracle at Delphi told him that he was the wisest in the land. But he said, how can that be? I don't know anything. Mm-hmm. And so he went on a journey to interview all the wisest people, the greatest physicist and the greatest math guy. And so as he went, he found out that these guys contradicted each other on certain things or didn't know the answers to certain things, but they all claimed they were the smartest, that they knew everything. Mm-hmm. And then it hit him. He says, well, they say they're the smartest, but they're so dumb, they think they know everything. Mm-hmm. I actually know that I'm dumb. I know I don't know anything. And that's why he's the wisest in the land, is because he knew how little he knew. If it sounds very contradictory. But all those who said, I already know everything there is to know. I know all the classics. I have them all memorized. I know all the math formulas. I know all the great cities and the rulers and all the magistrates of all those surrounding territories. There's really nothing I don't know. Those are the guys who were the least able to learn and soak up more information. So Socrates was the wisest in the land. And that's kind of that same thing.
I don't remember who shared this with me, but we were looking at the words intelligence and the words knowledge. And there's a lot of people who would profess to be very knowledgeable about given things, or so highly intelligent. But wisdom really is around understanding the limits of both knowledge and intelligence.
Yeah. I'll watch just an episode of Jeopardy and realize I don't know anything. I thought I thought I knew all geography, and they're like, "Where is the river Shmuga blah blah?" And they're like, "South of Mongolia." I'm like, I didn't know that. I don't. There's so many things I don't know. But you know what? Watching that gets me on Google. I start typing in the river something, the mountain range something else. Who was the 5th prime minister after the 1900s or what? I just start looking at everything to try and figure it out, and I realize, I have a lot to learn.
Talk about mentorship a little bit, because you haven't done what you've done without having good people who have either mentored you or helped you in given fashion and kind of steer you in the right direction. It has to happen in people's lives at some point, that they surround themselves with good people. Who are some of the people that you'd kind of point to in your circle of influence who have really steered you in the direction that they've done? Because you've clearly chosen some good mentors.
I have some mentors I've chosen, and some have chosen me,
Mm-hmm.
and some have just been just friendly faces along the way. There's just so many. I could start with my parents, who were always very encouraging.
Mm-hmm.
They were always very encouraging for me to make good choices, but they didn't have a good control over me. I was very wild, not in the standard sense that I didn't run away from home. I didn't commit any grand larceny or anything like that. I just simply did not believe that I knew that they couldn't control me. So I was going to prove that they couldn't control me. If they could even control my body and make me be somewhere, I was not going to let them control me inside. So that was a conflict for me for a while. But they were always very positive about me making good choices, trying to do the right thing. So having good parents was a good help. I had good teachers who tried their best with me. People don't know this, but I was not a good student in school. I didn't get on the honor roll, I think, till I was a senior, and I think that was just barely. I was constantly looked at and referred for special education and special education plans because I could not cope with the normal set, and part of that was the wildness. Like any teacher who said you have to read for 20 minutes was think they're somewhere else, because I'm not reading for 20 minutes. I'll do something else for 20 minutes, but not read. And so I was way behind in education, and it took me a long, long time in my adult years to catch back up. But there were some teachers who, regardless of all that, just said, I think you're going to be somebody someday. I think you can do it. You know, I had a science teacher. He still teaches at the high school, which is right next door to where I teach. I don't get to see him too much because the buildings are apart. They're on the same property. His name's Jeff Rookledge. And I remember him just several times, when I was goofing off, he didn't yell at me. He just said, look, you have a gift, and I don't know how you're going to use it, but if you keep acting this way, you're going to blow your gift. You're going to blow it. You need to get your head straight. And though I didn't get my head straight there, I always remembered what he said, that I had something special to offer, and that it could be tapped into if I would just settle down and focus up. So he was a great mentor. When I was in Ellensburg, Marlene Pfeiffer is the chair there. She was a great mentor to me, a great teacher of how the system works. All these yays and nays and parliamentary inquiries and slamming the gavel at certain times. Like she knows that stuff, and so she taught me that. There's a gentleman there who's the committee man of Kittitas County Party named Art Colts. He's a big media guy. He does a bunch of stuff on the internet and works. He got me on radio for the first time, and he said the same thing. He said, look, you have the potential to do great things in the party. Although I wasn't running for anything, I hadn't planned to do anything more in politics than just be the vice chair there, but he really took me under his wing, and I'd have weekly conversations with him about how politics works. And he really, he set me straight a couple times. One time we went on the radio, and it's a big GOP area. So you can't as a Republican on the radio, you can't really say anything wrong. I went on the radio first time, and I get the question, is there anything that the Democrat Party has to offer that's any good? And I straight up said, nope. Democrats have everything wrong every time. I said something like that. And the guy on the radio, we kept the interview going, but I found out later he was disappointed by that answer because it was just red meat for the Republican. You know, I was just joking around, but he didn't think it was funny. And Art said, listen, if we want people to take you seriously, you can't be saying stuff like that. Because there are Democrats who listen to the radio. You saying they don't have any good ideas? You saying they're out of line? You don't even know these people. And I was like, oh man. So Art was a great mentor in that sense that he was honest with me. And and I've had so many others. I could talk for an hour on mentorship, but I have had great mentors, and I continue to look for mentors. I find that Jim Walsh is a mentor. I haven't known him for that long, but in the time I've met him, he's been very willing to say, talk to me, call me, text me, email me anytime, and I can answer any questions, help you out. He's someone that I think is extremely knowledgeable, and I'm not going to let that knowledge be wasted. I'm going to get as much from him as I can. So.
You know, what's interesting is Jim just won his first election now 2 years ago, going on 2 years ago. But what a resource he's proven to be to the 19th district, and a fantastic person for you to get to know more and pick his brain more, because Jim has not disappointed the people of the 19th district.
Right.
And I've made several trips to Olympia and visited with him on a number of occasions, as well as others up there. But something really interesting, Jim had been in the House of Representatives for about a year at the time, and I was there on a trip in which myself and some others went up, and Jim had walked away in the galley with the others, and I was standing there. I think I had gone to the restroom perhaps or whatever, but I came back in and I was waiting, and the sergeant at arms was there, and he asked me, he says, "Who you with?" You know, whatever, he's checking, you know, to make sure that I had a reason to be there, and I was with somebody, and I said, "Well, I'm with Representative Walsh over there." And he says, "You know, that guy's been here a short time, but he's going to be here as long as he wants to." And he goes, "And I'm just amazed by how much influence he has here for," he goes, "junior legislator." He goes, "Nobody would know that in this building."
Right.
And so it was really interesting hearing somebody say that, who not even in, you know, not even one of the elected people, but just his observation of people coming and going and everything else. And he just said, it's like this guy's been here forever. He knows this place inside and out, and he has a respect of all the, you know, the other people from the other seats in the area. So great person to mentor with. Let's show Joel's Facebook page here before we end our broadcast, because we want to let people know how to get in touch with Joel. You will have a Facebook page up here shortly, right? And a web page they can find you at. But for now, you can go to Joel's personal page, Joel McEntire. Bring the top of the page down, Kyle, so they can get the correct spelling here. There it is.
Yeah, there's a few different ways to spell McEntire. Interestingly enough, it's the same as Jim McEntire. If we know him, he's running up north. I've forgotten the number of the district, but it's spelled the same way, like Reba McEntire, and that's actually a rare spelling. It's usually a Y or MCI or something like that. But that's interesting that I've met somebody or seen somebody that has the same spelling I do for my last name.
This got to be your wife and 2 kids there in the picture?
So there's actually 3 behind my profile picture. There we go.
There you go.
So this was a little while ago. So the baby standing up with my wife has a lot more hair now. She's 3. That's Daisy. The young lady up front is Lillian. And the boy right there next to me is Aiden. So we have 3 kids. And they're healthy and happy. And if nothing else, running for this position is, is about making their future secure and happy, like my childhood was happy. So.
Anything else you want to share with our viewers before we go off tonight?
Yes, definitely follow the Facebook page. For now, that's going to be the main way I can get information out to everybody. And very soon I'll have another Facebook page up that's just strictly for campaign stuff. And if you can get on this Facebook page now, it would be a fantastic way to link up with that new page when it gets up. We'll have a website up and all that soon. So if you can get on here, that'll be good enough. So please follow me through here, and it'll be a journey we can take together.
Well, look forward to having ongoing conversation with you down the road, and as we get further into the political season, and be glad to help introduce you to the people out in the district, because I love to see new faces running for office, and it's always good to have citizen representation in office.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, well, that's going to conclude our broadcast here on Northwest Digital News. On behalf of Kyle Torgerson, I'm Kevin Hunter. Our special guest has been Joel McEntire, running for the 19th District and Seat 2. As always, thanks for joining us here. Till next time.